Donald Trump has chosen his vice presidential running mate, United States Senator from Ohio, James David Vance. Curtis Hauk is managing editor of MRC Newsbusters, joining me now with his reaction. Curtis, thanks for coming on tonight.
No problem, Stacey.
Okay, so let's talk about it. A lot of people are really angry. I was surprised to see, real anger at the selection of JD Vance, accusations that he's too young, too inexperienced, he's a never Trumper. Where did he come from? Why him? Lots of angst about it. I actually think it's a great pick. What do you make of it?
Yeah, I think with Trump, because he's a Republican, the vice presidential selection has always been an issue. Whether the liberals are mad, conservatives are mad, everyone's mad. It's one of those things where we've noticed at the MRC, looking back through the archives, that someone is always going to be asking questions. People are going to be upset about it for whatever reason. Going back to Dan Quayle, like, what is he doing? Jack Kemp, he's too nice. Sarah Palin, she's out of nowhere. She's too much of a redneck. Paul Ryan, he's going to kill your grandma. And then for conservatives, yeah, with JD Vance, you're wondering, like, does he have a long track record? He's only been in the Senate 2 years. He was a convert to President Trump's cause, so he wasn't an original I guess, believer of the Trump train, rider of the Trump train in 2016. So I think people just need to cool down, just relax. Let's see how things go. Because of what happened on Saturday, we are in such uncharted waters. That yes, normally while conservatives may have questions about JD Vance, I think we should give him time. See what his speech is like on Wednesday night. And then if he wins, see how they govern. Because people, again, had a lot of questions about Donald Trump, too, because he'd never run for office before, so he didn't have to implement any sort of policy. And people were pleasantly surprised. I was one of those people who was like, I don't know about this guy. But then once he came into office and actually did what he said he was going to do, then people changed their minds. So I think that same approach might be a good idea for JD Vance.
Yeah, I think there really isn't much more for us to learn because unlike other people who maybe were a senator for a year or two, like let's say Barack Obama, with JD Vance, he has his entire life story in a book,
Mhm.
an Audible, and a movie for you. And I recommend the Audible highly. I mean,
And
it's
we know it's and Stacey,
yeah.
we know it's not like Barack Obama's Dreams of My Father, where it's a complete composite sketch, like a made-for-TV drama.
Yeah.
What happened to JD Vance is real. The Netflix series, is totally real. So, yeah, I just have to add that point that yes, that unlike Barack Obama, when people fawned over his life story and his memoirs, JD Vance's is actually real. There's no composite girlfriend out there.
Yeah, and the storyline behind his parents and then their divorce and then his mother and her descent into drug abuse and his childhood, really two childhoods running in parallel form, a very stable grandparent situation and his mother just continually dragging him down, and what that taught him about life as a poverty-stricken white American. And I make that designation because he makes that designation because so much of what we do now in the way of poverty remediation is targeted towards minorities. And I don't actually think there's anything wrong with targeting specific groups for
Mhm.
poverty remediation, but there is a sense that we've left some groups behind in our effort to help others, and the government interventions aren't working at all. So his America First viewpoint was formed in his childhood. It took him a bit to knit it together with the form of Donald Trump, but now that he is on Donald's team, it seems he is absolutely 110% there. So there's a huge expose, a number of them actually, a few hit pieces that were obviously in the can just in case he was the nominee. And there's this one that I saw it yesterday, and it's 55 things to know about JD Vance. Now, what's interesting about it is it's over at Politico, right? So I read Politico not because I'm on the left, but because they do have a lot of writers there that span the ideological spectrum.
Mhm.
And so I wasn't sure in their magazine section if this would be a hit piece or if it would be neutral. It's actually pretty neutral. It has a number of facts about him that I didn't know. I highly recommend to people to take a look at it. But they start off with, who is JD Vance really? Now, I feel like they ask those kinds of questions about Republicans. They automatically, when it's a Democrat, they say, James Biden, Biden, this one, that one.
Mhm.
But with
Yeah.
Republicans, it's who is JD Vance? Even his name was, so they go into how his name became Vance because, familially as a child, he was subject to the whims of his parents and his step parents and all that.
Mhm.
Um, do you think they're going to hate him as much as they hate Trump? I think they will. I think they're going to hate him just as much as they hate Trump, which is part of the reason why Trump picked him.
I no, I think that's right, Stacey. It's just gonna give them time, because yeah, the networks, I would say, surprisingly, ABC, CBS, NBC last night and this morning were very stayed. I think it was very underwhelming, and I think a lot of that has to do with Saturday, and also too, ironically, it's the Biden interview. The networks are still interested in what is Joe Biden up to? Is he creating more gaffes? He got mad at Lester Holt for asking, "Did you watch the debate?" You said to George Stephanopoulos you couldn't remember. Um, so, and ironically, yeah, Biden's answer is, well, you guys need to focus more on Trump and JD Vance. Well, but by going out there and doing more interviews, Biden is taking the focus off of that, because even though the media obviously do want Biden or whoever the Democratic nominee is to win, they're going to cover that too. So by Biden being in the spotlight and being out there to prove that he's all there, it's taking attention away from otherwise, hit pieces, hit segments on TV news at least, talking about JD Vance. And again, also, I think Saturday really changed things as well. President Trump's really defiant and emotional return to the stage last night, or to the convention hall last night with the bandage over his ear. Um, that was just something that I think caught the networks flat-footed. You almost saw them as human, and they saw Trump as human in that moment. So there wasn't as much focus on JD Vance yesterday. But yes, give it time, give it a few weeks. Let the Biden campaign call reporters down to Wilmington for drinks, and if we're
Their
talking in a
marching
week, I think
orders.
the narrative, yeah, we're talking in a week, this narrative will be completely changed. And once a date is officially set for Kamala Harris and JD Vance, I mean, the onslaught is going to be remarkable, because some of the media have already started jockeying, sucking up to Kamala Harris, because if Joe Biden wants out or gets out or is forced out, they have immediate access, because the Harris team will say that these people have already been on our side for a while.
Yeah, yeah. So, Curtis, I have to say that what I love about what you're pointing out here is that it's cyclical, and what we're expecting, we're going to get. I mean, the pie in the face routine is coming. They're going to go after him. But I think what's unique about this situation happened, it was, I think, yesterday. President Biden was approaching his plane, and a reporter came up and got a quick question from him and said, you know, President Trump has named JD Vance, US Senator from Ohio, as his vice presidential running mate. What's your reaction? And he said, no reaction. They're identical. Their viewpoints are identical. Nothing to see here. And
Right.
then it was as if he's already been, like, given a tongue lashing. If you don't stop going off script, we're going to kick you off of this ticket. And so he immediately got this look on his face like, ooh, two sentences. And he said, well, I got to go. And he turned around,
Yeah.
and then he took
But
to a little jog, as if to say, you definitely can't get a follow on here. Now, that's a whole interview in and of itself. But to go to what he said, why do Democrats expect Republicans to have a ticket where one person is demonstrably opposed to the viewpoints of the other person on the ticket? Like, why do they always
I know.
expect that?
Yeah, Stacey, this is exactly right. When you're like, "Oh my gosh, he's a clone," and that's like a really bad thing. You're like, yes, there's obviously tickets where there's been differences. Ronald Reagan, George H.W. Bush, they were very different. Kamala Harris, Joe Biden. Kamala Harris threw Joe Biden under the bus, talking about busing during the first Democratic primary debate. But by and large, yes, you want the candidates to be in sync. Mitt Romney, Paul Ryan, they talked about how close they got. Dole Kemp. There's tickets where, yes, they're linked together and they agree, because that way they can be pulling all in the same direction. That when a vice president is tasked with something, they actually have a little bit of teeth behind it. And I think that's also why Donald Trump did what he did, because if he gives JD Vance, say, the border, kind of like Joe Biden gave Kamala Harris, A, JD Vance would get it done, and B, he wouldn't need his hand held the whole time. I think
Mhm.
that's the other thing too. I think that would have been the case with any of these VP picks, but particularly with JD Vance, he already can anticipate what Trump wants, so he doesn't necessarily have to like come back to the teacher and being like, raise his hand, being like, I have questions. Am I supposed to do this, or do you think I should do that? No, it just makes things run more smoothly. So for Joe Biden to like talk about that as a bad thing, you're like, and
It was pretty funny. I mean, it was a coherent statement, so I'll give him that. He didn't fumble or
very
or
low
or
bar.
bust it. Yeah, very very low bar, but that's where we are right now. Curtis, you said about the border, also on Ukraine. I think there's no space between President Trump and JD Vance on the border, and there's no space between them on the issue of funding Ukraine or continuing the war, which is at this point it's just a sacrifice of human bodies because Russia is prepared to go on in perpetuity and the Ukrainians are hollowing out their actual population base fighting this war, never mind the money that we're borrowing to send over there. And now we're sending jets. I look forward to the next engagement. You talked about the debate. I know that is coming up. They've already agreed to it. I think it's going to be pretty spicy because JD
Mhm.
Vance is an attorney who actually like learned how to utilize the law. We will be watching, we will have our eyeballs glued to on a daily basis, checking in over at mrctv.org. You have the best clips and also interviews from people like yourself are posted there so people can check out when you and Dan Schneider and others have been across the media spectrum. mrctv.org, Curtis Hauk. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks, Stacey.
All right. And he's managing editor of MRC Newsbusters, newsbusters.org as well. Coming up after this S&C fast break, Trump is Hitler rhetoric under scrutiny post assassination attempt. Is it right to call him Hitler? We'll discuss.